Okay, so we're going to talk about our next topic that is vital for you. You're going to see quiz questions from this. You can get reaction paper topics from this. But also, this particular topic, we're going to introduce it right now, and then next week when we meet again, we're going to go into it a little deeper because this topic is what your very first project is going to be about. It's going to ask you to address for this particular unit. So we're at the very beginning of Unit 1, and probably next week, probably when we finish talking about this particular topic, I'll ask you to help me figure out a due date that we want for the first project. So the end of next week, we'll figure out a due date, and it probably won't be due till at least the end of week 3, maybe the beginning of week 4. Okay, so you'll have a lot of time to work on it. But this information also goes with the sociological imagination conversation that we had in a previous video. So in your notes, when you start to take notes on this, I would put a reminder for myself in the margin that this stuff is for Project 1, but it's also going to be stuff you need to refer to for Project 4. Okay? So 1 that happens within the next 2-3 weeks, and 4 that's going to happen like at Thanksgiving or something. Okay? Sometime around then. Okay? So these are, what we're going to talk about now are sociological theories or sociological perspectives, okay? I'm sorry, that's a G. People tell me I make funny G's, so that my G's look like Y's sometimes. So, sociological perspectives. What is a perspective? A perspective is a fancy word for a point of view. Do we all have the same point of view? The correct answer is no, we do not. Lots of people shaking their heads no. Not all of us have the same point of view. And so sociological perspectives, this concept is going to talk about different acceptable ways of looking at that data we were talking about in the previous lecture, where we have to collect data using the scientific method in a way that we know it doesn't have a bias associated with it. So when we collect data, we don't want it to be biased in any kind of way. Once we get the data, it's perfectly acceptable to examine the data from different points of view. And not only is it perfectly acceptable, it's expected. Like, that's what sociologists do. If you go into different classes in sociology, take more classes or become a social researcher yourself, you will use one or the other of these perspectives. Some people use a couple of perspectives at the same time, but there are 3. Your book actually introduces 4 sociological perspectives. One of them really isn't used so much anymore. Postmodernism is not really used so much anymore. So we're not going to take any notes on that. We're going to talk about the 3 most commonly used sociological perspectives. And those are the 3 that your first project are going to cover. Okay? All right. So, if you need to remind yourself, a perspective simply means a point of view. And it is true that there are multiple points of view about anything. The sociological perspectives that we're going to talk about, there are 3 common or commonly used theories that are used as the different points of view in sociology. Okay? A perspective is a point of view. There are 3 very common perspectives that are used in sociology. We call them the theories. And so let's talk about it. We're going to talk about them not in order of importance. We're kind of going to talk about them in order of the oldest one to the newest one. Okay? All right. So the first of 3 is called functionalism. Functionalism. So this particular theory is really the oldest. It was kind of the first sociological theory. In chapter 1, you will read about some of the early thinkers in sociology. There's a section at the kind of in the middle of the chapter that talks about the early thinkers. People like Emile Durkheim and Auguste Comte and those kinds of folks were functionalists. They looked at things on the macro scale. They didn't really focus on micro scale personal interaction. They looked at structural stuff on the macro scale to understand how society works. Functionalism, it's a macro scale point of view. Functionalists say that social structure is designed with lots of interdependent parts. So social structure has interconnected, interdependent parts. And those parts work together. That's what interconnected and interdependent means, right? If you are independent, you don't need my help. But if we are interdependent, then we need each other's help to prop each other up. So functionalists look at social structure, that's a macro scale point of view, and they look at social structure not as just one thing. It's kind of like you can use your car as an example. Your car is one thing, but when you zoom out and look at it, it's got tires and wheels and axis and the motor and the steering wheel's connected to this. It's a whole bunch of interconnected parts to make that one thing. Right now, I got something wrong with my car. It's bringing me here, but I've got an appointment to take it to the shop because something's not right, and since every part is connected to the other parts, if I got something about to click, then my whole social structure, my car, is not going to work like it's supposed to anymore. It's not going to function properly if something goes wrong. See that keyword function there? These interconnected parts work together according to a functionalist point of view. Functionalists say all these interconnected, interdependent parts, they work together for stability and order of society, of social structure. Just like all the parts of my car need to work correctly because they rely on each other to get the car down the road. Functionalism is a macro scale part of the social structure. We have used some examples in our other discussions. We've used examples like public health is a macro scale part of the social structure, right? So this is just an example. Certain examples, not all examples. Public health, and we've talked about the economy. We've talked about education and how education, you have to pay for it, higher education anyways. We've talked about some of these things in the other discussions when we were learning our first couple of topics. So, public health is something that we all know about right now because of coronavirus, right? Is public health connected to the economy? Is it? I see a whole bunch of people shaking their heads. Or nodding, not shaking their heads no, but nodding. Public health is definitely connected to the economy in the ways that we just explained in a previous lecture. Because it was a serious public health issue, so many businesses shut down, and therefore money stopped flowing, including some people's paychecks, right? Including some businesses' profits. And so some businesses have not reopened, even though we can now reopen businesses, right? Some people have lost their jobs permanently and having a really hard time finding another one because so many businesses shut down, right? So public health and the economy are connected. Education is connected also. You're going to see a lot of people back in school because they don't have a job and they're going to at least spend their time getting an education. Why? Is education connected to the economy? We just talked about how. How is education connected to the economy? Do you have to have a degree to get certain jobs? Yeah, you have to have a degree to get certain jobs. So some people, while they're unemployed, typically high unemployment numbers is great for colleges. It's not great for you because you're the one unemployed. But typically, unemployment is great for colleges because students start coming to us during their period of unemployment so that they can get a credential and make them more, give them more opportunities within the job market because now you're qualified for additional things, right? So all of these things are connected as part of the social structure, and they're built up over time to be connected in this way. They're built up over time. Does that make sense? Okay. So functionalism is a macro scale part of the social structure. This is a key word, stability, and here is another key word, order. Functionalists look at social structure and they say that because all of these different parts are interconnected and interdependent, it's built up. Society as a whole, these parts have built up over the centuries to rely on each other so that society is a stable and orderly place moving forward. If you mess with one, if you mess with something like public health, is something like economy affected? Yes. So functionalists don't really promote the idea of messing with society too much. Just leave it alone. It's there because it's all interconnected. Don't change stuff too much, because if you change something too much here, something here is going to change, something here is going to change, and then society won't really feel stable and orderly anymore. Is that kind of what we feel like the last few months? I know I have. It's really been a weird couple of months. Some people are talking about being disoriented, really, because life as you knew it before the disorder and the instability of coronavirus came, life as you knew it was kind of predictable. Is that a good word to use? Functionalists say that society is predictable because of the interrelationship of all the different parts. And kind of don't mess too much with the parts because other parts are going to be affected by it, maybe in ways that you couldn't anticipate, maybe in ways that you couldn't ever imagine, right? Okay, so this is one point of view. We will talk about it some more next week. How much more time do I have? Like 5 minutes? Somebody tell me. I have 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about just get a brief introduction to one more of these three commonly used theories that we call our sociological perspectives, and it's another macro scale point of view. So 2 of the 3 are macro scale, and the third one is micro scale, so we'll wait to do that one until next Tuesday, okay? So let me erase every word here except for macro scale, because the next one is macro scale, and it is called conflict theory. This word conflict here refers to struggle for something. Fill in the blank. Let me just, struggle for something at the structural level in society. That's what the conflict here is about. So conflict theorists also look at macro level social structure. But when they look at macro level social structure, it's very different than a functionalist who says everything is built up and designed the way that it's designed for stability and order. It's not perfect, but it's there, and it's functioning, so we'll leave it alone. A conflict theorist instead looks at social structure, and they say social structure is full of inequality. Social structure is full of inequality, and that is not fair. There's limited resources in society. Limited resources like money, like power, like rights, like privileges. Does every category of people in society have the same access to money? No. Does every category of people have the same access to power, like voice in politics and policy making? No, I see a whole bunch of people shaking their heads. Does every single category of people in society have the same rights and is able to exercise the same rights? No, I see people, no. We just, as a matter of fact, talked about in another class on Women's Suffrage Day. Y'all know that it was the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage just on the 26th. So women had to fight for the right to vote because women did not have a share in the right to vote. There's some inequality for you that a conflict theorist looks at social structure and says, this inequality is wrong. It's bad. People should be equal. People should be treated fairly. Conflict theorists don't look at social structure and say to themselves, social structure is what it is, let's leave it alone for stability and order. No, conflict theorists don't do that. Conflict theorists look at social structure, they zoom out and look like the space station down on the planet Earth, and they say, what about social structure is designed so that inequality is part of the system? Well, there's wealth and poverty. Well, there's all kinds of ways rights and privileges and power can be unevenly distributed. What's this word limited mean? What's the word limited mean? There's only a certain amount of something. Exactly. Thank you for answering. Limited means there's only a certain amount. The amount is not going to expand. It's not going to shrink. It's right there. It's a limited amount. So if there's a limited amount of money, does everybody get an equal amount? Our social structure is not designed that way. Our social structure is designed that you have to be here in this college class right now if you want to make money, if you want to make your peace, right? So there's not just an even distribution of all this kind of stuff. In our social structure, inequality is built into the system. And a conflict theorist looks at the two categories of people. I've used that word a couple of times, so let's make sure that we put that phrase on the board. Categories of people, There's categories of people in society. These are people who share the same social characteristics. They might be people who have the same age. They might be people who have the same race. They might be people who have the same religion. They might be people who have the same gender. They might be people who have similar social characteristics. Does every 18 to 25-year-old in the United States know each other? Of course not. What a silly notion. But is it reasonable to assume that every 18 to 25-year-old in the United States has similar interests, similar outlooks for the future, similar social justice issues affecting them? So we can call them a category of people, even though they don't know each other. Not everybody knows each other. And so 18 to 25-year-olds have a different political view, probably, than most 65 to 70-year-olds. Is that a safe thing to... Maybe 18 to 25-year-olds have a similar economic outlook, whereas it's very different for a 65 to 75-year-old, right? So we categorize people into groups, and in the conflict theory, you can look at this unequal distribution of all the social resources and talk about two general categories of people, one called the haves, and the other one's called the have-nots. You can break this down any kind of, whatever kind of resource you're talking about, whatever kind of scarce resource you're talking about. You can break it down into the haves and have-nots. If you're talking about money, some people are wealthy, some people are in the middle, and some people are in poverty. To simplify things, we'll say that. So the haves would be those with wealth. Does wealth give you power? Typically, right? And people without power, people without wealth, are typically going to be considered the have-nots. Conflict theorists say that social structure is full of inequality like this, and that's where the struggle comes from, because the haves want to keep what they have, and the have-nots want to fight for what they don't have. And I don't mean like fist fight in the street, I mean like protests that are happening right now all over the place. Calling attention to social issues, that kind of thing. Social movements to try to change some of the inequality. What do you think? Any questions? Okay, so for functionalism and for conflict theory, there's a whole lot more that goes into it, but this is just kind of like a sampler tray of what these two of three sociological perspectives are. Please remember, we're going to go into these in a little bit more depth next week, but please remember that not only are you going to have quiz questions next week and maybe choose a reaction paper topic from something that we've talked about today, but also this works toward your Project 1 specifically, which is 50 points, but that won't be for like another couple weeks, okay? So, any questions? Are we good? Okay, thank you for your attention, and I'll see you next week. Bye.